So we just talked about how to write the semantics for our conditionals, right? We did greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to, and equals to are basically the same rules. We did and with short circuiting, and or is the same thing, but we short circuit in the opposite direction, right? So if either of them turn out to be true, then we just return true. Otherwise, we go into the right-hand term and expand that more. So let's talk about if then else, right? So what do we want to express here? We want to say, right, be able to do something like this. If x is greater than 10, then return, let's say, 1, else 0. And I said that our abstract syntax for this is, well, so we're going to want to eval, right, if, then, else. We have these three expressions. Let's call this E conditional, right, that corresponds with this guy. We'll call this one E then, which corresponds with everything in this bracket. And we'll have E else, which corresponds to this block of code. Under an environment, always need the environment there, and that should be equal to something. Well, what do we need to know in order to do this? Right, well, first off, we need to know what is the value of our conditional, right? Because without knowing that, how do we know which branch to take? So we're going to eval E conditional under the environment. And, well, the very first thing that we want to check is this equal to, let's call that v1, and let's just suppose that that's not a Boolean, right? Then what should this return? I mean, it should return an error, right? Because if I'm trying to say if 10, right, what do we mean by that? I mean, obviously in C that will return true because they have a really weird connection between true, false, and numbers, right, integers. But in general, we're writing a language where we have separate types for Booleans, numbers, and errors. So we don't want to be doing this sort of cross-typing stuff. We really want to have that this is a conditional expression and that this should be a Boolean. Right, so this is if then else error. It's the name of the rule that we're going to give that one. Okay, well, now we have if then else on E conditional, E then, E else under our environment. What's the next situation? Well, we want to eval E condition, right, under environment. And, well, if that's equal to true, right, what do we want to do? So that means that, well, x is bigger than 10, so I want to go into my then statement, right? Whatever's going on in the else statement I don't care about, so I just want to eval E then under our environment. Let's call that v1, and we'll just return v1. Right. Again, here I don't necessarily even have to write this on the top. I could just say that this is eval of E then under the environment. This is perfectly a legitimate way to write this down, and we'll call this the then branch. I like to write the v1 so that it's clear that that pre-processing has already happened, right? We've already sat down and we've gone through this eval, and we've come up with some value, which we'll call v1. Something to maybe notice here is I didn't care what v1 is, right? There's no like sub-error statements going on here. This is just it, right? Because v1 could be an error, and then we'll just propagate the error further back up. I never said that the block of code has to return, you know, a number. It could be true and false, right? And that's a totally legitimate if-then-else statement. So v1 could be a number, it could be a Boolean, it could be an error message. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna calculate what happens in that then branch. So obviously this leaves the final rule, right? If then else on E condition, E then, else under the environment. And what should we do? Well, we want to make sure that our condition is what? False, right? At which point we should be going down our else branch. So we're going to eval else under the environment. Let's call that v2 because it's in the second or third slot. And we'll just return v2, and this will be if then else that rule. And that's all there really is to the semantics of if then else, right? It's sort of exactly what you'd expect from using if then else statements long enough in your career, right? If the condition is true, we go through the then statement. If the condition is false, we go through the else statement.